we have an interest in these upland river areas all along the Drakensberg of KZN and the Eastern Cape. And one river that's particularly close to my heart is the Umgeni, and particularly up at the top end near to its source. Now, the Umgeni is quite an unusual river because most of our rivers rise near the escarpment of the Drakensberg and flow down. The Umgeni is unique. It comes out of a whole number of wetlands and comes in various tributaries until it forms a sizable river. And none of those areas are actually in the Drakensberg. They're away from the Drakensberg at lower altitude than most of the other rivers. The Umgeni sponge is referred to as an area, and it includes several wetlands, or flays as we call them here in South Africa. One of them is a protected area, the Umgeni Flay, and it's what people consider to be the source of the Umgeni. But the reality is that there are quite a number of these wetlands. It's a whole area of seeps and wetlands that come down into the river. One of those wetlands, and it's the only one that's accessible on a public road, and in fact it exists in the public domain, is the Impendle Flay. If you travel from Howick up towards Impendle, just before you drop over into Impendle village itself, which is in the Umgeni catchment, you go past a village called Gwanovuga. Now, Gwanovuga is a village that is strung out along the perimeter of the Impendle Flay, and it looks out over that flay. And that gives rise to a stream called the Poort Stream, which goes through a couple of commercial farms. It goes for about 13 k's, and then it joins the Umgeni. The importance of this wetland is that it acts as a store first and foremost. It's a natural store of water, and it spills out over an escarpment, down a waterfall in fact, and into the river. And so it receives summer rainfall that soaks into this wetland, and during the course of the year it meters that water out in a regulatory fashion. It also acts as an enormous filter. The water coming out of there is the most beautiful, clean water. And it's worth preserving because cattle are allowed in there, there's a certain amount of game in there, people are allowed to walk through there, and so it's at risk of perhaps being trampled, compacted, overgrazed, burnt too frequently or infrequently. So there really is a need to look after these special places because it's our water. That water goes into the Umgeni, which goes into Midmar Dam and through in the other dams of the Umgeni system, all of which supply water to nearly 6 million people in the Pietermaritzburg, Howick, Durban area. A young lady by the name of Hlengiwe Zuma, who works for the Department of Environment, Fisheries and Forestry, who is seconded to Impendle and works in the Impendle municipal offices, decided and took it upon herself to arrange a wetlands day for the purpose of educating the people of Gwanovuga about this asset.
So what initiated today's program was to get the community into preserving their environment and specifically the wetlands.
Fortunately, the wetland for now is still intact. But what we are here to do is to try and keep it that way. There are those small indications of degradation here and there, loss of certain plants and stuff, and probably the grazing needs to be balanced between the community and maintaining the ecosystem. But I think for now it is fairly in a good state, and would like to encourage both local authorities and the local communities to keep it that way.
The community, if they have no information about it, it won't be preserved, it won't be protected. So we needed to get them into doing what us environmentalists are doing.
Tell me a little bit about what went into organizing this day, because you got, I was guessing, probably 200 people here. Tell us how you did that.
Yesterday we actually conducted a door-to-door, just give a brief indication of what are we going to be doing today and why they should come. We included many stakeholders: agriculture, social development, the economic development, tourism and environmental affairs, Impendle local municipality, and we included our local leaders, traditional authorities, the councillors. They were all parts of the planning.
The essence of the message was that they must recognize wetlands and the natural environment at large as a living entity that has immense value and that underpins their very health, their very wealth, and that there are so many opportunities that sit within the natural environment if we do our part to look after it, and that it doesn't sit in the hands of big companies or external bodies to come and actually do something about it. They can start at an early age and refrain from, example, polluting the natural environment. And it is also important that they know the value that they can derive from the environment, and that without the environment, they're exposing themselves to so much risk around them, whether it's flooding, whether it's lack of clean drinking water, whether it's lack of green grass or proper nutritious food for their livestock. But it's important that they are actually able to link these opportunities and these ecosystem services that the natural environment provides.
Nothing is impossible. We may take these schools here in this rural area as maybe less productive, but we do have scientists, doctors, and professionals who are excelling in their careers, who grew up in such areas. I made an example of a young girl to say she can grow up and be a scientist just like the other colleague of mine. They too can do that and then come back and feed into their local areas, especially with the academic information as well as economically. They come back and feed into their areas. There's this perception that it's for the white people or it's for tourists somewhere out overseas and so forth. What we are trying to stress is that it is all of us. It's not limited to probably race or area where you go from. It's entirely up to you that you realize the values that you have in your certain area and maximize the benefit and utilize that you have at that moment.
On a global level, I mean, we've got 15 crane species, but then in South Africa, we've got 3 crane species, which is the wattle crane, then the crown crane, and of course the blue crane. But out of those, the crown and the wattle cranes are the species that are totally dependent on wetlands. This is one wetland which is in a community which has cranes, and you don't often get to see that, and especially on communal land where there are so many issues that might actually be affecting cranes in terms of disturbance and all of that.
When I was full-time at EWT, I would come here maybe twice a week to monitor the wattle cranes because there's a nest in the wetland that is in this area. So I used to come here twice a week to monitor the cranes and also come to the local schools to teach the kids about the cranes and wetlands.
As part of the engagement, I actually asked people if they've seen some of the cranes that I brought here. And of course, there were like a mixed feeling, some of them having seen them and some of them not having seen them. But I think they were proud to actually know that in the area where they live, these species, they still okay.
Today's event was very important in terms of raising awareness to the local people. What is very interesting is that they know about the wetland and they know that the wetland is important for them and for their livestock.
I think the main message that the community went with was to ensure that they play a biggest role into protecting the environment, because if they are not playing their role, it won't be protected as it should be. They have learned more than we have expected, and this thing of protecting a wetland, it will benefit them economically, environmentally and socially.
You were clearly very successful because we got a lot of people here, so that's a good learning for doing these again. You've worked out something there that really works, and just to commend you on putting this together, I think it's been an awesome success.